Hundreds of thousands of researchers around the world are working to improve life and address imminent threats to humanity. Often their research ends up in the scientific valley of death in the form of publications and patents that never see the light of day. That is about to change. Welcome to the Lab to Startup podcast, hosted by Naresh Sunkara, founder and executive director of the Berkeley Postdoc Entrepreneurship Program at the University of California, Berkeley. This show has two main goals: share the stories of those who have successfully founded startups based on their own research, and highlight resources needed to help those aspiring to launch startups in the deep tech space. Whether it's electric cars, vaccines, addressing climate change concerns, or possibly establishing life on other planets, Naresh and his esteemed guests want to help scientists, engineers, faculty, and researchers bring their innovations to market. Learn more and subscribe today at labtostartup.com. And now, here's Naresh.
My guest today is Keis Ide, a partner at the University of Tokyo Edge Capital Partners, UTEC, a Japanese venture capital firm investing in deep tech across the world. Since the inception in 2004, UTEC has been working with academia in Japan and abroad by supporting technology ventures that are solving global issues by bringing together capital, talent, and knowledge around science and technology. The tenet that science and technology have no boundaries is core to their philosophy. Their approach complements startups with Japanese industrial and scientific collaborations to create success cases on a global scale. In this episode, we will discuss their investment philosophy and learn about how they work with startups. We got to discuss the differences between the startup scene in Japan and the US and how there is so much room to work together. I was introduced to Keis by a good friend of mine, Liam Berryman, the CEO of Nilambo, who was previously a guest here. UTEC invested in Nilambo. I hope you enjoy and learn from this conversation. So Keis, I think to set the stage for our conversation today, it would be helpful to understand what the University of Tokyo Edge Capital Partners, UTEC, is all about, and maybe start with the history of the firm and your investment thesis.
UTEC, the University of Tokyo Edge Capital Partners, pretty long name. UTEC was founded in 2004, so it's been 17, 18 years. We have had 5 funds so far. The fund was started at that time when Japanese public universities, there's a regulation change in how the public universities were run. Previous to 2004, the universities are part of the Department of Education. So it was run by the government money. It was just part of the government. And after the regulation change or reform, the universities became its own nonprofit educational corporations. So the intent was that the universities will have to compete on their own for grants and money and for talents as well. And to do that, they wanted to learn from other universities around the world and see how they were run and became successful universities. And one model that they saw was to spin out educational resources, such as intellectual properties and people, and put together, they become startup companies, right? Great examples, Stanford and UC Berkeley, you see a lot of startups coming out. So they tried to see a little bit more in detail how they were run, how they're done. And they found that they had some venture capital firms that are closely associated, but not really a part of the university, to have a good distance between university and venture capital. So it's not together, because when you're together, your investment precision becomes a little bit dull. But if you're separate, you can see it clearly that if it's a good investment or not. So that's how the University of Tokyo Edge Capital Partners was designed and then formed in 2004.
So this was started as a VC firm to fund companies or spin-outs coming out of universities.
That's correct. And especially in the beginning, University of Tokyo. So University of Tokyo is considered the best university in Japan. It has many departments that covers many colleges and schools within them. But soon after our first fund, we started to increase the focus, not just from the University of Tokyo, but to other universities in Japan and also outside of Japan as well. Currently, in Fund 4, we have finished investing from. In Fund 5, which we raised last year, we are still investing now. We expect probably about 30 to 40% of our portfolio companies will be outside of Japan.
That is interesting. Maybe we can take a step back and divide your investment period from 2004 to 2010. Those are the formative years, and from 2010 to 2020, and then what investment is looking going forward. I'm trying to get the lessons that you learned as you evolved as a fund, and also to set things in context. What was the size of the fund?
In the beginning, it was about $80 million US fund. The second one was about the same size. And since they became a little bit bigger and bigger, the fifth one, the one that we're currently running, is about 450. So it has gotten much larger since then. Investment thesis, that's your question from the beginning. We have always focused on strong science and technology and strong founding team and global applicability in terms of science and technology and ambition of the team. And that's a quite high level thesis. Industry-wise, we look into quite wide range from IT to physical science to life science. IT, we don't really do like games or apps, that B2C type of services or products. We do more B2B, SaaS, for example, heavily AI research-oriented IT type things, IoT devices. In physical science, we go a little bit more deeper in B2B space, such as material science, chemistry, physical science, manufacturing, for example, robots and manufacturing technologies. In life science, we have pharmaceutical, bio, and a little more IT-oriented healthcare type of stuff as well. So it's quite wide range. And in the beginning, having this wide range of investment, we actually went from early stage to late stage as well. So it was a wide range in terms of industry and wide range in terms of the stage.
How big is your team?
At the time, it was about 5 people. Turned out that when we went in, industry was fine. But in terms of stage, it was always better to go in early. And especially when we went in as a lead investor, we had much better results compared to late stage, pre-IPO type of investments. Multiples were better, and we had much more control over how the companies grew over the years of our investment. So from Fund 2 on, we moved from general investment in many industries and many stages, both in lead and follow status. We moved on to seed to early stage as our investment style. And we follow that till now.
So you try to get in at the seed stage if you can, and you've been evolving into the later stages too. Why did the international angle come in? You said about 30-40% of your funds are international now. When did that change happen, and what was the thesis behind that?
In the beginning, it was mostly in robotics, technologies coming out of humanoid research, because Japan has been a top runner in that area. And there are foreign non-Japanese researchers coming to the University of Tokyo to research robotics. And they'll go back to their research facilities in the US or in Europe. And we have this connection. And when they start to start up companies, we get connections and we get called to take a look at those companies. That was the beginning. And since then, we have connections for those founders. So that's one way to get these connections from a previous investments. Another way we source deals, non-Japan areas, there are many university-related venture capital funds like us. Like your alma mater, UC Berkeley has a couple very established, high reputation venture capital funds that are associated with the university. And we have made network with those people. And when those funds find their portfolio companies looking for Japanese investors, because of the technology or because of their supply chain or maybe the market, they would like to have a Japanese investor base, shareholder base, and we're lucky to have them call us to take a look into those companies.
Great. We will circle back into the subject of how you source companies, but I wanted to touch base on your own investment career, how it has emerged. Maybe you can begin with just a thumbnail sketch of your background up to until what you're doing right now, and maybe touch on a couple of formative experiences that you feel shaped your worldview and why you enjoy investing in everything around this.
So I was educated in the US in engineering. I went to University of Virginia for college and Stanford for grad school. I started my career in semiconductor industry in San Jose in late 1990s. That was when the dot-com bubble was starting to bubble up. I was doing management consulting at the time after my career as an engineer around 2000. That's the height of dot-com bubble. So it was quite interesting time being in the Bay Area. And I was doing technology marketing consulting at the company called the McKenna Group. I've heard of a book called Chasm by Jeffrey Moore.
Yeah.
So Jeffrey Moore was a partner at the McKenna Group. So I think it was around that time he wrote that book, and I had read that book as well. And because of that, we had many clients in technology, and sometimes startup companies will have us hired for their marketing strategies. And like I would think, like, why would startup companies can hire pretty high consulting fee services like us, and they have lots of money from venture capitalists? I actually didn't know about venture capital financing until then. I knew about technology, but not much about finance. And that was the first time I got to know about VC industry. After the dot-com bubble, I decided to come back to Tokyo. I actually joined a startup company, again in semiconductor. And this time I was making dynamically configurable processor. The company was doing okay, but at the end it was just Monday. And then I moved on to VC industry on the investing side. That was 2007. So it's been about 15 years. 15 years ago, the VC industry in Japan was very, very small. Compared to the US, it's much smaller. I think it's about a 1/50th in terms of the amount of money that's going into venture capital funds and being invested into startup companies. It's much smaller. But at the time, 15 years ago, the industry was not really there. As an asset class, it was not really recognized in Japan. So there was no institutional investors investing in VC funds. So it was very difficult to raise money. The amount was much smaller. When we were investing $1 million, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
It was a different time.
You touched upon something interesting about your marketing career back in the Valley. You're doing marketing consulting. How have your opinions changed, if they changed, about marketing for early stage companies? And how have you looked at it previously, and what the current state right now is, the amount of effort that needs to go into marketing for early stage startup companies?
So the marketing I mentioned is mostly in product and technology marketing rather than marketing communication to the public. So have you heard of the concept of the whole product? You have a core product, which is your technology that enables the value creation to the customer. But then you have to create a whole product in order to make a sales happen. Your customer is not just buying a technology. Your customer is buying a product that wraps the technology around it. Think of a B2B setting. You have to have a customer support to buy your technology. So being able to provide a robust customer support is part of your product. And that's part of your whole product. You need documentation. You need many different things for your customer to actually make a purchase decision. Your R&D department may be able to buy your technology, take a look at it and see if it works or not. But your actual customer needs a whole product, not just a technology. So that's the concept that was taught in the Chasm book. Many technology companies just get in this rabbit hole of developing the technology deeper and better, faster, cheaper. But then there's lots of other pieces are missing that's required for your customers to make a purchase decision. Trying to understand what's necessary. Now it's called like minimum viable product, MVP, for your customer to really use it.
That hasn't changed much from 15 or 20 or 100 years ago. I think you still have to focus on that.
Right. You really need to understand your customer's purchase behavior, purchase decision, what's necessary for them to make a purchase, and fit not just the technology, but your product into that requirement. So that's product marketing.
That's a nice segue into go back into one of your deciding factors about founders. That's what you look for. What exactly do you look for in a founder at this early stage R&D phase, most of them, before you invest in them?
As I work a lot with scientific founders from the universities, and they are just excellent world-class scientists or engineers. Often they are so good at that, they're so focused on that, they may lack experience in managing people or doing finance for the company. So I don't look for everything in one founder. I try to make a decision of the founder's way of thinking about creating a team, how to acquire talent, to create a team that fulfills all the requirements for a company to be successful. I try not to look for all of that in one person. very rare to find a Superman like that.
Have you seen any patterns? These are the characters that really work for a founder. And also, are there characters that you found are not going to work for a good team? Anything that stands out?
I find that when you are, as a founder, aware of what you're really good at and knowing what you are not so good at, you can do it, but it's much more efficient if you get somebody else to do it for you. That's a good trait. If you are the type of person who wants to and who can control everything, but obviously you will not be doing everything at the rate that an investor may want. So if you're a control freak, if you think you can do everything, then that may not be a good sign.
Being able to know what you don't know is important, and surrounding yourself with the best ones. Those are good points. The other point you mentioned about was about how the technology is applicable worldwide. What exactly are you looking for in terms of customer and market research when you look at a technology from the founders?
When I talked about the technology applicable worldwide, the technology becomes a product, and product becomes purchased by product and services purchased by somebody. And what I meant by say global is that it is not a local solution. It's more of a global solution to a global problem. And when we say global problem, it could be in many different layers. Recently, I made an investment to a fellow UC Berkeley program graduate, battery technologies. Battery technology, there's a concentration in Asia. It's a worldwide problem, nothing to do with culture or language. When you want to make a battery, you have problems that you get to maybe because of chemistry or because of physics. All battery manufacturers face certain problems. And this company is trying to provide a solution to that. That's what I meant to say by global problem. And coming out of an academia, often the research is applicable to many different things. The solution that I just mentioned about battery technologies, it could have been used for many other manufacturing steps in different manufacturing of products. But they decided to focus on batteries for now, especially high-end, high-performance batteries. The market from the entire manufacturing industry to battery to high-end batteries, the focus has become much sharper. And that kind of marketing focus, again, coming back to marketing, trying to get to the minimum viable product that is much sharper image is really important.
In the early stage deep tech startups, there is the technology risk and there's a market risk. Where do you weigh each of these two topics before you make a decision? And how do you work with a founder in helping them steer the risk factors?
As a VC investor, we are not technology experts. We know a little bit of many different things, but for the technology itself, the founder and the founding team, the scientists and engineers at the company know the best in the world about the subject. So we have to take quite a bit of risk there by trusting in the founder and the team. So we look into the credentials and we look into what they have done before. We talk to the potential customers in how much impact the technology will have when the technology becomes available as a product. And we try to weigh the risk between the technology development risk and the impact this product will have where the product is developed. So that's the technology part. And then I guess it goes into the marketing risk as well. How much do the customers want this thing? How excited they are about this technology development? We try to assess that by conducting industry expert interviews.
Going back to one of the points you mentioned previously, there could be different areas where a technology could be used. In that case, the battery technology you thought was good for the high-end, high-efficiency batteries. How should the founder look at those verticals before they make a decision on like, this is the area I'm going to focus on? Any insights into that particular aspect from your experiences?
This kind of goes back to the marketing consulting that I was doing from that area. When you try to find the first pin, your beachhead market, you try to find some place where it's small enough that you can go in and talk to all the important customers. Because you do not have either marketing budget or technology development budget. You want to make sure what you're developing is one size fits all for this one particular very specific segment of customers. There may be 5 around the world, but if you once make this product, it's good for the 5 people. You don't want to make one product from one customer and another one from another customer. It just costs too much. So just by segmenting a customer really precisely into a very small customer set, then you are not recreating your whole product. The technology is the same, but your whole product becomes different from customer to customer. You try to minimize that. And when your target segment is small enough, your marketing cost is much smaller too, because those are the people who probably talk to each other. They're in the same industry, doing the same thing, and they're probably attending the same conferences. So obviously you don't have to do any kind of mass marketing. It's much more concentrated. You could probably go to the same conference to talk to all these 5 people, and they probably talk to each other too. That kind of thinking, I think, is really helpful when deciding on your beachhead market.
I think that'd be a nice place to converge a lot of things you talked about and talk about how UTEC actually helps these founders from the time somebody applies to your firm to the point where you've invested money and are supporting the founders. What is a typical process and your style of operation with these founders?
Are you asking about after we make an investment?
Previously too. So how should one approach you for funding and the decision process? And once you decide the kind of support you offer to these founders?
UTEC's investment focus is quite wide range in terms of industry or seed to early stage investment. So if you are a founder in that segment, that's a strike zone for us. So please contact us anytime. So we do a typical due diligence. We talk to you, we talk to your customers, we talk to your partners, create investment thesis. And we often do that together with the founder. Obviously working on customer set currently, but what we want to look for is looking at that result, see where the company should go to. There's a lot of conversation going on to create the investment thesis, i.e. the business plan. So we try to create business plan together. Then our typical investment consideration process is in 3 steps. One is for me to make a investment committee presentation to the committee. Once it passes, we ask the founders to come in to the management presentation. And then after that, there's another set of investment committee meetings. I think it's quite typical of larger size VC firms. So we try to take a lead position or co-lead position. So there's a negotiation on the terms and lots of legal time spent on that. And usually it takes 2 to 3 months for the investment to be made. And after that, what we do is just follow what we have just discussed in terms of business plan. So in this 2 to 3 months period, we are working together with the founder on the business plan. If you raise for 18 months or 24 months, we have planned for the 18, 24 months. And what we often work with is in the beginning is the team building. It takes a long time to find good people, obviously in the US or in Japan. So we get on that right away. We at UTEC have about 20 people strong venture partner team. That's the team who help the growth of our portfolio companies after we make an investment. Their tasks that they can cover is from recruiting and HR to finance to marketing, PR type marketing. And they can help you write press releases and get you in touch with writers at major newspapers and websites and such. We have a lawyer on the team. We have patent lawyer on the team and stuff like that. But as I said earlier, the team is a really important part to propel and accelerate the company's growth. So we have 4 people dedicated to team building in C-suite, manager level and up. We have maybe not weekly, but bi-weekly meetings with the HR team, with the founder, and make sure that we are working on the right thread or network to find good people. And yeah, that's where we start.
That's a lot of support. I'm really liking this model. You've been here doing this for 15 years now. What are the most common mistakes that you see founders make? Are there any that repeat and you help them correct those mistakes?
Maybe different from US and Japan. I think in the US, founders try to assemble team members from outside of the company as well. There's a lot of outside support, especially probably in Silicon Valley. There's a lot of supporting structure to run the company. So the founder can focus on the technology and the funding team can focus on technology and business of the company. And a lot of tasks to run the company can be outsourced, like legal, HR, PR, other things. It's much less so in Tokyo compared to Silicon Valley. So we need to hire people to do that for each company. In the beginning, I think founding team focuses on technology and business and ignores the company that supports the entire support activities. So often, for example, running the books, making sure you have like monthly or quarterly numbers, that gets pushed behind and you just don't see numbers on time. I guess you can always check the bank book to see your cash balance, but getting the PL or BS becomes really difficult. And once you get behind on those things, it gets even more difficult to go back and recreate. So yeah, those things are really important as you move along and actually making a company, not just a product or technology.
Maybe that's a good segue to talk about the differences you've seen in startups that are being built in Japan and in the US. Are the investors in charge of helping these founders build that rest of the team as well in Japan in terms of accounting? Is that what you're saying?
So we actually provide some accounting service in the beginning of the company, maybe 3 or 4 CPA equivalents in Japan who can come in and help the companies when they do not have any resources in the beginning. But at the same time, we are trying to help them hire a good business operator so the company can do it on their own.
What are the differences in the founders itself? Like, how is the chemistry different in Japan and that in the Valley, maybe in the US in general?
I'm not sure if I can talk in general, but from my experience, the founders that I see in Japan is much more science focused, and founders I see in the US is more balanced in science and business and running of a startup. I think it's culturally more embedded in the education system or the peer networks that you have a lot more exposure to startup business in the Silicon Valley, probably the most anywhere in the world because of the history. We can talk in the similar language when we talk to the founders in Valley. Whereas when we talk to founders in Japan, because they often come from academia, both of us, the founders and the VC, we have to be careful in the language so that we don't have miscommunications.
I think Valley has been lucky just because the ecosystem is that way. Exposure is a lot more. And I think deep tech founders still have issues, if you may call that. A lot of them are very focused on that technology. They're in love with the technology, not as much in that market aspect. It's been changing. It's been improving for sure. What are the major categories that you think there could be interesting businesses built in? The lay of the land. Are there any specific areas that you think startups need to be built a lot more that you find interesting in funding?
I think we just have so many challenges and problems in the world that I don't see any specific areas that's more important than others. And that probably is reflected to our investment thesis that we invest in just great science and technology that solves the problems of humankind. Areas that I like to do is in manufacturing, just like manufacturing technologies, things that I can actually touch and see. Recently, I have invested in 2 companies coming out of UC Berkeley area. They're both in chemistry and physical science areas. The one that's mentioned in battery technology, another one is material science. The industries run globally for those areas. The problems that they can solve is just huge. And it's very difficult to see for regular consumer, but the benefits that they get is just embedded into their lives. I find that kind of challenge really important and fulfilling when the challenge is made.
Are there areas in Japanese startups that are doing much, much better and much advanced in terms of products compared to the US that you can talk about?
Actually, I don't think there's any that's Japan is doing better.
Let's flip it on its head. Are there any startup areas where the US is doing really well compared to the rest of the world from where you stand?
I think the US is really fortunate that it has a lot of people. The US has 350 million people and the English population is the biggest in the world. So once you make something in the US, especially for the mass, of course, the competition is really high, but once you make something that works, then it's applicable to so many people. That's, I think, is the biggest advantage. Whereas in Japan, because the Japanese language has such a small population, 120 million people who speak Japanese around the world, and culture also is quite unique. When we make something for this culture and language, it's difficult to make it applicable to other languages and cultures. So that's a disadvantage. That I guess could be an advantage as well, because there's not so many foreign invasion in this area because it's such a unique place. That's more in the consumer area. In B2B, especially in manufacturing, I think we could be same playing field. If you're good at it, you can win the entire world. Maybe in robotics, Japan has some advantage, especially in manufacturing portion, industry robots and such. For that as well, the software and the algorithm part is becoming more and more important. Like autonomous cars, it's basically robots. And the software has been not really a forte for Japanese. I think it's done much better in the US if you compare just Japan and US.
Any startups that are exciting that we should know about in Japan at this point that you invested in?
Company that I invested in most recently, this comes out of the University of Tokyo. What they do is, it's in the AI area, but not a general AI, but it's domain-specific AI. The team has been working on CAE, a computer-aided engineering. That's when you do simulation in 3D CAD. So for example, you think of a crash test. Rather than actually making a car and crashing it, you do the same thing in a simulation. So that's used in crash tests, to aerodynamics testing, to if it's a building, you can test for earthquake. So if you want to build a car and crash it, it costs millions of dollars because it's a one-off car. You have to get this special equipment and you actually crash it. And if you do it in computer engineering, CAE, it costs just the computing power and some electricity. But sometimes, for example, in the late stage aerodynamics testing, it takes 3 days of computing time to complete an aerodynamics testing. So it actually takes time because there's a lot of computing going on. So this company that we have just invested in from the University of Tokyo, it learns the inputs and outputs of computer-aided engineering, which they have been working on for the past few years. And they introduced this graph neural network technology to learn the inputs and outputs and make the time of the simulation from a few days to just a few minutes. If you are an automaker, usually you do like 100 to 300 simulations per car when you're developing automobile. You can do 10,000 times to 30,000 times of simulations if you have a similar amount of time allocated for simulations. And that means you can actually explore a lot wider space for design options.
A lot more probabilities and more data points, basically.
Yeah, this kind of 1000x faster technology is something really exciting. And the reason why they were able to do that was they were first domain experts in CAE, and they had this expert in AI who can combine the two domain expertise together to make it into the product. So it's a Series A company. They are trying to get to MVP right now. They're working with automobile OEMs, multiple of them at the moment, trying to get to the market pretty soon.
Take this example of computer-aided engineering startup. How does UTEC help founders think about the go-to-market motion and help early-stage founders think about this problem? If you played a role in connecting to those automobile partners or anybody else, trying to get to those details.
I met the founder before he founded the company. So he was doing CAE at the moment. And in the past 5 years, they decided CAE is a really difficult market to get into, but they found this AI expert to join the team. And then they introduced this new AI technology to make this product a much attractive one. So when I re-engaged with them, they're working with automotive OEMs already. And my first hunch was that, all right, that's a really difficult customer set to go into. Automobile is just notoriously slow. So they decided to make a product, a very focused one function product, rather than trying to go into the entire CAE market. So it's going to be just a one functionality that can be plugged into other providers' CAE product. Make it really easy to input data and output data from this one function and just focus on the functionality. And also by doing that, it's a functionality for aerodynamics simulation, which can be used in cars, but also in other industries such as HVAC, for example. In HVAC, you have to simulate how the air moves in the room. So it can be used in that function as well. So just focus on aerodynamics simulation and focus on customer sets.
So basically focus on picking a very niche area and try to solve a problem there rather than going broad.
That's correct. When we talk about CAE, it can be used in any manufacturing. It's a solution that can be used in many wide range of problems. But we decided to focus on just accelerating simulation for aerodynamics.
Speaking of customers and markets, when you come to Valley here, all investors talk about the need for speed of going to the market. How much do you emphasize on the speed?
Speed is really important because it depends on how much money you can raise. And if you have to raise a lot of money, and you dilute yourselves. So yeah, speed is important.
Especially around the deep tech space. It's a hard engineering problem. It takes time. If it's a life sciences problem, you're basically depending on cells and the time and a lot of unknowns in that space. How do you balance speed and solving a deep tech problem?
So you really can't expect deep tech startup companies to evolve in the speed of IT startup company. So you as a founder, and similarly for the investor too, when we together write a business plan, we just write out how long it takes and how much it's going to be necessary to get to a certain goal. Let's say for the goal to get to the market, if it's a pharmaceutical company, or having up to a few customers and being able to go IPO for a deep tech manufacturing technology startup company, set that goal and then come back from that goal to see how many raises you have to have, how many milestones you can create, and creating appropriate milestones, and then coming up with the amount of money that you need for that, and make sure that founder as well as investor can agree to that larger view of the company getting to a certain outcome.
So it's almost like working backwards, trying to create milestones and try to align with the founder in terms of money needed and time needed. I think it's going to be about expectations at the beginning of that business plan.
As in everything, expectation control is quite important.
Talking about expectation controls, we all make some assumptions and hypotheses. Are there anything that stand out in your experience that you assumed that something was going to go this way and it went completely wrong? If you can talk about things that did extremely well based on your plan and completely bombed and you had to completely take a different approach.
So by chance, startup companies do not go as planned, right? Often the plan is not going to work. The delay is the default. So what was most surprising about my investing experience is that when it went as planned, this happened a few years ago. We made an investment in an AI company, was making a B2B SaaS type of software service, hardware component as well to run the on-premise service. Once we invested in the company, it went IPO after 15 months, Series A company. And that was as it was planned. Talked about it, this best case scenario, it actually can do this. But when I was pitching to the investment committee, I was saying this is quite aggressive. My base plan is to have 1 or 2 more years of development time on exit, but it actually went. So it was a great team as well as the market being favorable.
Are there cases where they completely went south?
Well, that happens often.
Any common patterns or any lessons learned there?
We do take technology risk. As I said earlier, technology part, we can help in building teams to solve the problem, but science is science and you can't really change science. So when we miss that part, it's unfortunate, but it happens that the technology that we believed the science will enable, we cannot get there because the science doesn't happen. That's an early stage or seed stage science and technology investment we'll have to face.
How do you deal with failure of an investment? From 2 points of view, as an investor, you're putting money in. The second part is like you're working with founders who are putting all their life into the startup. How do you support those founders if a company has to be shut down? And how do you deal with your own failure? How do you build resilient models for these founders to look at and the investors to work with?
From the investor's point of view, the failure is part of the business. So yeah, of course, it feels really terrible that you use money from our LPs and I wasn't able to return the money to the LPs. It is a failure, but it's part of the business and I try to get it back from our other investment that returns more than what I have lost. But then for each investment, I have personal involvement with the team and the founder, and it feels really sad when that happens. But you mentioned winding down and dissolving the team and such. But often what happens is that because of the funds period, we cannot get to see till the end of the company. So the company is not probably doing so well. It hasn't had an exit yet. So we have to take part with our shareholding for the company and then sell it at really discount or really minuscule amount. That's how we part from the company. The company still is in existence and having some other sponsor afterwards. Often that's what happens. I think it's quite a rare case when the company has to be dissolved during the time that we have a shareholding in the company. That has happened, and that's really painful, obviously.
Let's slightly shift gears into another topic of interest for me is one, when you have to bring in an external CEO. Founders, especially scientists, they may not be a good CEO because it's a lot of salesy kind of a job. How do you broach the subject, and how do you help a team hire a CEO who is not a founder, not a technology person?
That conversation comes up during our due diligence, because we have had enough experience in investing in scientific founders that we rarely find a Superman who can do everything. Scientific founders are really good in science and technology and not so experienced in management of a company or people. And we need different skill sets to make a company successful. So what we try to communicate during the due diligence process is that it's a team sport. You, as a founder, maybe in the beginning you have to do everything, but as the company grows, you shouldn't be doing everything. You should be focusing on what you can do the best and leverage your time for that. And sometimes what happens is that the founder has really strong sense of ownership, that they do not want to pass away some responsibilities to somebody else who's coming in later in the company. If that trait is too strong, then it's probably the person doesn't have a good team mentality to create success. So maybe we just pass on that opportunity to invest, even when the technology and science seems really good. So when we have that conversation during due diligence, some people are more accepting of that, some people are not so. Even when it's accepting and we agree that we need to hire outside people to run the company, we often make sure that it's in our investment contract. We try to find somebody by a certain time. And if it doesn't happen, we can send in a CEO or COO or somebody that's C-suite who can help the founder to run the business.
Any cases where a scientific founder has become a good CEO? What are the characters in those people that made them a good fit as a CEO?
From our experience, the partnership between scientific founder and hired CEO, the combination of those two people have become successes. And we haven't actually had great success with just one scientific founder doing both science and technology, wearing the science technology hat and CEO hat. We haven't found that kind of super founder yet.
How far into the startup journey do you bring in a CEO, an external CEO? Do you bring it early on, or the technology matures to a certain stage and then you bring in a CEO?
So this CEO may come in as a COO first, because we do not know if this person can be a great CEO yet for this company with other people. Dynamics they have to come into and then operate in. So what we typically do is that the founder has the CTO and CEO hats together in the beginning, and then we bring in the CEO candidate as a COO, sure he can run the business okay, and work together with the team, personality match and everything, and then ask the COO to become a CEO, and previous founder who has had both CTO and CEO hat to pass on the CEO hat to the new person.
Interesting model. Looks like it's been working for you. There are lessons to be learned on that subject here too. I think we do have issues with some scientific founders who are not able to realize that they can't do everything. They need to be passing on the baton. The sooner the better. But you are based out of Tokyo, right? And you invest in startups in the US. How is that working out?
Especially with COVID, travel is quite restricted. So it has become much more difficult to have a conversation face to face. Zoom has become such a tool that we can use every day that I think the frequency of conversation has been actually increased. But in terms of sourcing and due diligence, I make sure that I want to meet the founder and the team face to face. So actually it takes longer to try to arrange for the trip. And when I come back to Tokyo, I have to be in quarantine for 10 days, 14 days. So the process is taking much longer now. Hopefully it will become much better this year.
Any plugins on behalf of UTEC and how to best contact you?
Contact is on the website. You can email me or just messenger, just contact me anytime. I do mostly IT and physical science area investments, some healthcare. I do not do pharmaceutical because of my background. I just can't really do that yet. But we do cover as a fund the entire industry. So if you are a founder for pharmaceutical area or bio area, I can always introduce my partner for you. So give me a shout.
Keis, thank you. This is a fun conversation. Never had a VC from Japan on my show, and I got to learn a lot from you. And thank you for taking the time to be on the show. Good luck with your fund and all your investments.
Thank you, Naresh. It was good to talk to you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Lab to Startup podcast. You can find links to the resources and programs mentioned in these episodes, connect with Naresh, or subscribe to this show at labtostartup.com.